The little salon at 11A Cavendish Square was suffused with the delicate fragrance of tea roses and the quiet hum of coaching traffic beyond the curtained windows. Hercule Poirot sat imperiously upon a velvet chaise longue, his hands folded across the satin of his waistcoat, his moustaches bristling as he surveyed his hostess. Mrs. Penelope Ashcombe, elegant, silver-haired, and trembling with suppressed agitation, clutched a small object to her breast. "I am so grateful, Monsieur Poirot," she began, her voice quivering like a spring leaf. "You must understand, in this tortoiseshell box lies the legacy of my family for 3 generations. And now it is locked, and neither key nor combination reveals its secret." Poirot inclined his head, those little grey cells already in motion. "Madame," he said in his soft, precise English, "tell me everything from the very beginning. The facts, no matter how trivial, may prove crucial." Mrs. Ashcombe sighed, setting the box gently upon a small mahogany table. Its polished surface was striated in amber and ebony, carved into delicate arabesques. A tiny brass lock barred its lid, and there was no apparent keyhole, only a narrow, vertical slit. "It arrived at our home in Cornwall 3 days ago," she explained. "My sister Ethel dispatched it from Bath. She wrote that it had belonged to our great-grandmother, Dame Beatrice, and that it contained letters and mementos too precious to photograph. Yet, when the box arrived by courier, I found it sealed, tight, no key was enclosed, and Ethel claims never to have possessed one." Poirot tapped the table with one manicured finger. "And since its arrival, no one has handled the box." "Only myself." Mrs. Ashcombe shook her head. "I have not forced it. I feared damage. Last night I attempted to open it before retiring, without success. I slept poorly, convinced that someone in my household had stolen the key." At this, Poirot's eyebrows rose. "Someone in the house, you say?" She inhaled sharply. "Yes, my maid, Mrs. Trevelyan, is new, and my nephew, Mr. Cyril Ashcombe, has arrived for a weekend visit. He has been most curious about the box. He joked, of course, but something in his manner—" "Mademoiselle Trevelyan?" queried Poirot. "She is discreet but abrupt. I have trusted her implicitly until now." Poirot nodded, eyes narrowing, in polite consideration. "Very good. We shall examine the box together, and I shall question those you name. But first, a cup of tea?" The maid, newly introduced to the room, glided forward in prim uniform, bearing a porcelain tray. Poirot accepted the cup with a flourish, gently tapping his lips. The maid withdrew, and Mrs. Ashcombe sighed with relief. Poirot studied the box more closely. He noted a faint seam running just beneath the rim, and at one corner a nearly imperceptible button of brass. There was no padlock or chain. The box's mechanics must be internal. "Madam," he said, "we must consider the possibility that this is not a simple lock-and-key device. It may open only by pressure, applied to a sequence of points. A puzzle box, if you will." Ashcombe's eyes widened. "A puzzle box? But is such an object common in private families? In certain artisan workshops of France and Germany," replied Poirot. "Skilled craftsmen created boxes that require precise finger movements, pushing panels, sliding plates. Ingenious? None. We must treat it as a mechanical riddle." The door opened, and Mrs. Ashcombe's nephew entered. Tall, with an angular visage and a rakish moustache. His breezy countenance shifted to polite curiosity when he saw Poirot. "Ah, Monsieur Poirot," he said, "I hope I'm not interrupting. I heard you were engaged in some delightful sleight of hand." Poirot regarded him coolly. "Monsieur Cyril Ashcombe, I presume. I hope you will pardon me if I reserve my sleight of hand for more confidential audiences." Cyril laughed, but his eyes flicked to the box. He advanced to the table and extended a gloved hand. "May I?" he asked. "Allow me the pleasure of failing before your brilliance." Poirot waved him back. "Non, mon ami. Too many hands spoil the puzzle. You will observe, yes, but no touching." Cyril flushed but nodded. "Very well, but do include me in the tea at least." As Mrs. Ashcombe poured another cup, Poirot laid the box upon a silk pad and produced a small ivory stylus from his coat pocket, a tool he often employed. With deliberate care, he pressed the stylus into the slit, gently probing for hidden slides. The Countess's nephew leaned forward, breath caught in his throat. For several moments, Poirot's face revealed nothing of his thoughts. Then, with a sudden click, the top panel shifted inward by a hair's breadth. The inspector's eyes gleamed. "Mes amis," he murmured, "I believe we have our first clue." Outside, the sun dipped below the rooftops, and the little salon grew golden. With evening light, the puzzle had begun, and Poirot's journey into the shadowed past of the Ashcombe family was well underway. Chapter 2. The web of Secret's morning light filtered through the lace curtains of the salon, painting delicate patterns on the polished floorboards. Hercule Poirot sat at the mahogany table, the tortoiseshell box before him now slightly ajar, revealing only a sliver of its hidden contents. Mrs. Penelope Ashcombe hovered nearby, anxious curiosity etched upon her face. "Madame," Poirot began, his voice calm but insistent, "before we pry further into this mysterious vessel, we must speak with those who might have knowledge or motive to hide its contents." Mrs. Ashcombe nodded. "Of course, Monsieur Poirot. I cannot imagine why anyone would wish to conceal our family's heirlooms, but I consent to your questioning." Stepping into the corridor, Poirot encountered Mrs. Trevelyan, the Ashcombe's maid, carrying a tray of refreshments. Her composure was unruffled, though her eyes flickered with an unreadable expression. "Madame Trevelyan," Poirot greeted, motioning her to stand before the box. "You have served this household for just over a month. Tell me, did you ever see the key to this box, or observe any peculiar instructions upon its arrival?" The maid placed her hands demurely before her. "Monsieur, I saw only the packaging, sealed by the courier. No key, no letter beyond what Miss Ethel might have enclosed inside. I delivered it straight to Lady Penelope without opening it." Poirot's moustaches twitched. "And did you notice anyone else handling the package? Perhaps Monsieur Cyril?" "Only Monsieur Cyril glanced at the delivery," she replied. "He was intrigued, yes, but he did not open it." Her voice was steady, yet Poirot perceived a slight tremor, as if she feared speaking too freely. "Très bien," he said. "You may go." She retreated, leaving Poirot and Mrs. Ashcombe in the hushed corridor. Returning to the salon, Poirot found Cyril Ashcombe inspecting the box's lid with a scholarly eye. His angular features betrayed impatience. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, "surely you must have discovered something by now. Pray, What lies within this confounded container?" Poirot regarded him coolly. "Patience, monsieur. A puzzle demands respect, but I warrant you will learn more of its secret soon." He inclined his head toward Mrs. Ashcombe. "Invite your sister, Mademoiselle Ethel, to join us. Her testimony may prove enlightening." At mention of her sister's name, Mrs. Ashcombe's countenance flickered with hesitation. "Ethel, she said she would not return until tomorrow. The rain delayed her train in Bath." "Rain, you say?" Poirot tapped his fingers thoughtfully. "And yet the skies are clear here in London. Curious." He paused, letting the implication hang in the air. Cyril frowned. "You think she lied?" Poirot smiled subtly. "Perhaps not lied, perhaps delayed by circumstances. Yet I wish to question her about the box's origins. For now, let us peer inside." Gently widening the box's seam, Poirot lifted the lid and withdrew a stack of aged letters bound by a faded silk ribbon. Underneath lay a small velvet pouch, and nestled in its folds a miniature portrait painted on ivory. A young woman of striking resemblance to Mrs. Ashcombe, but her eyes glinted with something deeper, almost defiant. Poirot laid each item upon the table. First, the letters. They are addressed to Dame Beatrice Ashcombe from a certain A.V. See here, the initials and the heart-shaped seal pressed into crimson wax. He handed the top letter to Mrs. Ashcombe, whose hand trembled as she broke the seal. I do not recognize the handwriting," she murmured, scanning the page. "And who is A.V.? "Patience," Cyril interjected. "Let me see." He leaned forward, scanning the letter. A.V. could be Archibald Vane, our solicitor in Bath. He handled my grandmother's estate. Poirot nodded. A plausible conjecture. Yet note the tone. Passionate, urgent, words speak of love concealed and promises broken. This is no mere legal correspondence. Mrs. Ashcombe's eyes filled. Great-grandmother was widowed young. I knew she was heartbroken, but never of an affair. A secret romance, madame, often casts the longest shadows, Poirot observed. Now, the portrait. Who does she resemble? Cyril's gaze shifted from the miniature to his aunt. She looks like Aunt Penelope, but younger. Perhaps mother's cousin? Poirot tapped the ivory with a fingertip. Noticed the inscription on the frame, "To my dear Beatrice, from Everard, 1864. Aha! Everard Vane, cousin to Archibald. So A.V. is Everard, not Archibald. Eyes widening, Mrs. Ashcombe set the portrait gently aside. But Everard was disinherited half a century ago for scandalous behaviour. He was said to have vanished in Europe. His letters, then, may reveal the location of further mementos he entrusted to grandmother, Poirot surmised. And that pouch, let us see what it contains. Untying the silk, he retrieved the small velvet pouch and shook it gently. A soft jingle announced its contents. Inside lay a single gold key, its bow shaped like an entwined V and B. Cyril gasped. Tdeet. Cyril gasped. The key! Why was it separated from the box? To protect the secret, Poirot said with a knowing glance. Some puzzles reveal themselves only when their parts are scattered. We must consider who took the key, and why. In shills, Ashcombe looked from nephew to maid, her brow furrowed. Then, someone in this house hid the key. But who? Poirot's gaze flicked to Cyril, whose jaw tightened, and then to the silent maid, whose eyes darted away. "Mon ami," he said softly, "the puzzle deepens. Trust is fragile in the presence of hidden histories. We must untangle this web before more secrets escape into the night." Chapter 3. Shadows in the servants' quarters. Late afternoon had slipped into early evening by the time Poirot left the salon. He carried the tortoiseshell box, the letters, the portrait, and the small gold key, all tucked carefully into their velvet pouch. Mrs. Ashcombe and Cyril stood at the window, silent and tense. "Mon ami," Poirot said softly to Cyril as they passed through the corridor, "I wish to inspect the servants' quarters. Secrets often hide where we least expect." Cyril hesitated but nodded. "Very well. I trust your methods, even if they disturb the household." He looked pale. Poirot gave a slight bow and led the way down a narrow staircase. The walls, once freshly painted, showed streaks of wear. At the bottom, a corridor branched left to Mrs. Trevelyan's room and right to the kitchen and scullery. "Let us begin with Madame Trevelyan," Poirot murmured. "She appears uneasy." Cyril stayed by the stairwell. Poirot rapped lightly on the maid's door. "Monsieur Poirot?" came the reply. The door opened to reveal the maid in her plain dress, her face calm, but her eyes wary. Poirot stepped inside, Cyril at his heels, and surveyed the small, sparsely furnished room. A single bed, a wooden wardrobe, and a washstand stood against the walls. A trunk lay at the foot of the bed, its lid closed, but not locked. "Madam," Poirot began, placing a gloved hand upon the trunk, "may I ask your permission to examine your belongings?" The maid's eyes flicked to Cyril. "Monsieur has every right," Cyril said. "We must find where the key was hidden." Trevelyan swallowed and nodded. "Of course." Poirot unfastened the trunk's brass latch. Inside lay neatly folded uniforms, a few personal garments, and, at the bottom, a small leather pouch identical to the one they had found. He drew it out and examined it. "Curious," Poirot murmured. "This is the same design as ours. What do you keep inside, madame?" Trevelyan's face paled. "Personal items, letters from home, coins, nothing else." Poirot opened the pouch. Within lay a scrap of paper bearing a hastily scrawled address in Bath, and beneath it a pressed violet. "A souvenir from Bath," Poirot observed. "Is Ethel Ashcombe known to send pressed flowers?" The maid hesitated. "Miss Ethel, she sends postcards, but I've never seen flowers." Poirot placed the pouch back. "Très bien. You may keep your things safe, madame. Merci." In the corridor, Poirot turned to Cyril. "Madame Trevelyan keeps a duplicate pouch. If she meant to hide the key, why 2 pouches? And why this pressed violet?" Cyril frowned. "Perhaps she found the key and intended to return it later. But this violet—" Poirot's moustaches twitched. "A token. Let us remember it. Now, to the kitchen." They crossed the hall to the busy kitchen. The cook, Mrs. Wellington, bustled over a simmering pot. She glanced up at Poirot's arrival, her face neutral. "Monsieur," she said curtly, "I trust you're not here to criticize my soup." Poirot inclined his head. "Madame Wellington, I seek intelligence. Have you noticed any unusual deliveries, packages or items brought into this household beyond the box itself?" The cook paused, ladle in hand. "Nothing beyond the box, sir. But yesterday a small parcel arrived for Master Cyril. A leather envelope sealed with red wax. Cyril started. For me? I received nothing. Father was away. Show me. The cook retrieved a battered envelope from beneath the counter. The seal was broken. Inside lay a single sheet of paper, a copy of one of Everard's letters, its edges singed. Poirot read it. Meet me where the tide turns. Come alone. Trust none. He looked up. Do you recognize the handwriting? Cyril's face turned ashen. It matches one of the letters we found. But how did this copy reach me? Poirot folded the note carefully. Someone here wishes to draw you into the past, possibly Everard himself, or those who cherish his secret. He glanced at Mrs. Wellington. Who else might have had access to your scullery? The cook shrugged. Thomas, the scullery boy. But he's a simple lad. Poirot tapped his chin. Not to be ruled out. He pocketed the note and, with Cyril, retraced his steps to the salon. The household now seemed veiled. Walls conspired, servants' eyes whispered. Poirot's little grey cells buzzed. He set the letters and portrait before Mrs. Ashcombe and Cyril. We have new developments. The maid's duplicate pouch and bath address. The scullery's copy of Everard's letter with a summons to a secret meeting by the tide. Mrs. Ashcombe clasped her hands. Then, someone alive now is playing Everard's game. Poirot nodded gravely. Indeed, we must confine our circle. Madame Trevelyan, Thomas the lad, perhaps Ethel, and you, Cyril. One of you knows more than you admit. Cyril's eyes narrowed. Or fears more. Poirot steepled his fingers. We will meet by the Thames tomorrow at dawn, where tide turns. There, secrets may surface. He rose. Until then, I require solitude with the box. Mon ami, repose yourselves, but keep your thoughts vigilant. As evening drew its veil, each member of the household retreated into uneasy dreams, while Poirot paced the salon, envisioning the tide's ebb and flow, and the revelations it would bring. Chapter 4. At the turning of the tide. The air was crisp, with early morning chill, as Hercule Poirot and Cyril Ashcombe stepped carefully onto the gravelly bank of the Thames. Dawn's pale light shimmered on the water, revealing the gentle arc where the tide turned from ebb to flow. A low mist curled among the willow trees lining the embankment. The two stood silent, watching the river breathe. Monsieur Poirot, Cyril murmured, his breath visible in the cold air. I confess my nerves are on edge. I am no sailor, yet here I await a ghost. Poirot's eyes gleamed in the dim light. Patience, mon ami. The tide waits for no man, yet tonight it brings our truth to shore. They advanced to a weathered wooden bench, its surface slick with dew. Cyril's lamp cast a small circle of light. Poirot set down the tortoiseshell box, the letters and the miniature portrait carefully upon the bench. He produced a small brass lantern and set it beside the relics, illuminating them with a warm glow against the pale river. From the shadows emerged Mrs. Trevelyan, her footsteps soft upon the gravel. She paused at the bench, her face pale but composed. Behind her, Thomas the scullery boy shuffled forward, clutching a bundle of wet reeds. Both avoided Cyril's gaze, but watched Poirot keenly. "Madame," said Poirot, "you have come as promised. And you, Thomas." The boy bowed awkwardly, confusion and fear flickering on his young features. "Monsieur," he stammered, I only did as I was told. By whom? Poirot's voice was gentle yet firm. Thomas looked toward Mrs. Trevelyan, then away. She asked me to meet her here. She said she needed something from the box. Trevelyan's hands trembled. This is true. I feared the key might be lost forever. Her voice broke. No deflection, Poirot replied softly. Speak truthfully, madam. She drew a steadying breath. I discovered the key among the letters when dusting the salon. I recognized its bow, the entwined V and B, and feared its power. I consulted Miss Ethel by letter, sending that paper address. Poirot nodded. The scrap found in your pouch. He looked to Thomas. And the pressed violet? The boy swallowed. She told me it was a signal, a token from Bath, to show I had delivered her message. Cyril's brow furrowed. Ethel again, but she is not here. Poirot's gaze travelled down the river. Not yet. He turned back to the maid. You did not open the box. Trevelyan wept softly. No, monsieur, I was too afraid, but I sent warnings. Poirot lifted the portrait. Warnings or invitations. Ethel desires to reclaim these mementos, but why? The maid shook her head. She claims they prove her right to our family estate, that grandmother promised her a share if she remained loyal. Cyril's jaw clenched. My sister has always been stubborn, but this to conspire against her own kin? From the rising mist stepped a tall woman in a long coat, Ethel Ashcombe herself. Her cheeks were flushed, and her dark hair was damp. She halted before Poirot with a defiant tilt of her chin. Monsieur, she said crisply, you called me. I have arrived. Poirot inclined his head. Mademoiselle, we wondered if you would come. Ethel's eyes darted to the box. Would see that my rightful heirlooms are yours no longer. Mrs. Ashcombe and Cyril exchanged horrified glances as Ethel approached the bench, the lantern swinging in her hand. Poirot held up a restraining finger. Your claim, mademoiselle, rests upon a promise. But the letters speak of a different bond, love, not inheritance. Everard Vane promised grandmother his heart, and she gave him these tokens in trust. There is no codicil to speak of land or titles. Ethel bit her lip. Then why did she send a tortoiseshell locked box without key to Penelope? Because she wished Penelope to experience the puzzle of love and loss, Poirot replied. She meant the box as a lesson, that the past opens only when one understands its workings. Cyril laughed bitterly. A lesson! She ruined my mother's reputation. Ethel's eyes glistened. No one ruins my family with hidden letters. Poirot stepped between them. Your feud must not blind you. The truth lies here. He opened the box fully, exposing 4 more letters, under the ribbon and a folded will bearing grandmother's signature. See, the final letter outlines the codicil. Everard bequeaths his share, but only if the recipient solves the puzzle in good faith. Grandmother's will confirms this. Cyril seized the letter and read aloud. To Penelope, my dearest, that you may prove your loyalty and your heart, I leave my portion of Greystone Manor, but only if you comprehend the workings of this box. Fail, and the estate goes to the family's next branch, my sister's child, Ethel. Ethel stared at the text, colour draining from her face. Trevelyan gasped. Thomas trembled. Mrs. Ashcombe wept softly, relief mixing with sorrow. Poirot folded the will. Thus, the box was never meant to conceal treasure, but to test faith. The key's separation, the letters, the portrait, all part of the riddle. Now that Penelope has proven her devotion by consulting wise counsel and acting with honour, the estate remains hers. Silence settled over the embankment as the tide began its turn. Ethel's shoulders slumped. Cyril took his sister's hand. Trevelyan looked on, guilt and relief warring in her eyes. Thomas backed away, clutching his reeds. Poirot pocketed the key. "Mon ami," he said to Mrs. Ashcombe, as the lantern guttered in the breeze, "the puzzle is now complete. Greystone Manor is safe in commendable hands." He watched the river, content that the turning tide had carried away the shadows of the past. Chapter 5. The Legacy Secured. The sun had risen high by the time the household reconvened in the little salon at 11A Cavendish Square. The tortoiseshell box, now empty of its mechanical secret and heavy with revelation, sat beneath a glass dome upon a low table. Mrs. Penelope Ashcombe, her face alight with relief, clasped Poirot's hand as he prepared to take his leave. Cher ami," she began, voice trembling, "I hardly know how to thank you. You have restored more than property. You have restored our faith in one another." Poirot inclined his head modestly, pressing a finger to his moustache. "Madame, it has been my greatest pleasure. But remember, the most precious legacy is not bricks or land, but the unity of family." He then turned his gaze to Cyril and Ethel, who stood side by side, their previous animosity softened into sibling solidarity. "Monsieur Cyril," said Poirot, "you must embrace your sister now, for forgiveness is the final key to any heart." Cyril, cheeks flushed, stepped forward and wrapped Ethel in a firm embrace. She wept quietly into his shoulder, and Mrs. Ashcombe dabbed at her own eyes with a lace handkerchief. "Papa will be so relieved," Cyril murmured, stepping back. "He always hoped we'd find harmony." Ethel smiled wanly. "And I must apologize for my ambition. I forgot the true bond we share." Her apology, simple yet sincere, seemed to light the room with renewed warmth. Poirot turned to the maid, Mrs. Trevelyan, who hovered at the edge of the circle. "Madame Trevelyan, your loyalty to the family, despite your fears, was admirable. You did what you thought best." The maid bowed her head. "Monsieur, I meant no harm. I only wished to honour Miss Ethel's wishes." Poirot offered her a small, understanding smile. "Fear can lead us into shadows, but courage brings us back into the light." A soft knock at the door heralded the arrival of a courier, bearing a letter from Greystone Manor in Cornwall. Mrs. Ashcombe, curious, broke the seal. Inside lay an invitation from her cousin, an offer to visit the ancestral home now that its future was secure. She read aloud, "Dearest Penelope, it is with great joy that I invite you and your family to return, to make new memories where old ones were once locked away. Toby the butler writes that the manor will welcome you," Mrs. Ashcombe said, handing the letter to Poirot. He scanned the invitation, his eyes bright. "Ah, madam, the circle closes. Greystone welcomes its rightful heirs, and the past lies gently in its foundations." Mrs. Ashcombe turned to Cyril and Ethel. "We shall go together as a family." Cyril grinned broadly. "I look forward to exploring the old library, reading Everard's original manuscripts." Ethel laughed softly, the sound clear and unburdened. "And I shall collect new flowers, pressed this time by my own hand." They exchanged a playful glance, the rivalry of yesterday now a bond of shared curiosity. Poirot gathered his cane and small travel bag. He moved toward the door, pausing at the threshold. "Madam, monsieur," he said, addressing the assembled group, "remember this. A legacy is not only what is left behind, but what you choose to continue. May your years at Greystone be filled with understanding, peace, and joy." Mrs. Ashcombe stepped forward, offering Poirot a small gift, a delicate brooch of tortoiseshell, fashioned in the likeness of the box. "To remember you by," she said. Poirot accepted the brooch with a gracious bow, fastening it to his lapel. "Merci, madame. It shall remind me always that the smallest object may contain the grandest of mysteries." With that, he tipped his hat and stepped out into the crisp London morning. The carriage awaited, and he mounted it, turning briefly to watch the Ashcombes standing together at the window. In their faces he saw love rekindled, secrets resolved, and a future unburdened by old shadows. As the carriage rolled away, Poirot looked toward the horizon and reflected on human nature's capacity for error and redemption. "Oui," he murmured, "in every puzzle one must seek the heart's true key." With a contented smile, he prepared for his next adventure, ever watchful for the locked boxes of fate awaiting his little grey cells. Chapter 6. The Return to Greystone Manor. A fortnight later, the Ashcombe family stood once more at the threshold of Greystone Manor, its ancient stones bathed in late afternoon sunlight. Ivy climbed the walls in emerald tendrils, and windows gleamed like watchful eyes. The air was scented with sea salt, carried on a gentle breeze from the nearby Cornish coast. Beside Penelope Ashcombe stood her husband, Lord Henry Ashcombe, their children, and Ethel and Cyril. Mrs. Trevelyan hovered at Penelope's elbow, clutching a small travelling case. Meanwhile, a carriage rolled up the drive, bearing Hercule Poirot and his valet, George. "Mon Dieu, how splendid!" Cyril exclaimed, stepping onto the gravel. He strode forward, running a hand along the ironwork gate. "It seems unchanged, yet everything feels different." Ethel nodded, her gaze fixed on the tall towers beyond. "I can almost hear Everard's laughter in the corridors," she said softly, "and I shall no longer feel his absence as a wound, but as a memory reclaimed." Lord Henry Ashcombe, tall and austere, offered Poirot a warm handshake as he descended from the carriage. "Monsieur Poirot, welcome back. Your intervention has restored our family's peace. Greystone owes you a great debt." Poirot bowed graciously, his moustaches quivering with pleasure. "It is I who am honoured, Lord Ashcombe. This manor's stones are redolent with history, and its mysteries now resolved. But perhaps there remain fresh puzzles hidden among these halls." He smiled with just a hint of mischief. Penelope guided him along the gravel path toward the front entrance. "Monsieur, you must stay for luncheon. The housekeeper has prepared a feast to welcome you." She glanced at her sister. "Won't you join us, Ethel?" Ethel hesitated, then smiled. "Indeed, it is only fitting that I share in the celebration. Trevelyan, too, relaxed, offering Poirot a curtsy as she passed. Inside, the great oak-panelled hall opened into a lofty chamber lined with ancestral portraits. Tapestries depicting family exploits in high relief softened the walls, and beneath them stood a long wooden table laden with silver urns and crystal decanters. Housemaids floated about in crisp aprons, setting plates of cold salmon, smoked pheasant, and artfully arranged fruits. As they settled around the table, Lord Ashcombe raised a glass of chilled sherry. To Penelope, our steadfast matriarch, to Ethel and Cyril, whose unity shines brighter than ever, and to Monsieur Poirot, whose brilliance unlocked more than a box, it unlocked our hearts. A chorus of "Hear, hear" greeted the toast. Poirot tapped his glass lightly with a spoon. "Madame, monsieur, it is with great humility that I accept your gratitude. But let us raise a second toast, to the past that shapes us, and to the future we now embrace together." The family clinked, glasses again, laughter and warmth filling the hall. Ethel leaned toward Cyril. "I never thought reconciliation could taste so sweet." Cyril squeezed her hand. "Neither did I, but here we are." After luncheon, Lord Ashcombe led the party on a tour of the manor's upper floors. They passed the library, a vaulted room of shelves stretching from floor to ceiling, with a rolling ladder poised at Potter's elbow, and paused before a window overlooking the rugged coastline below. Penelope inhaled deeply. "And I remember gazing here as a child, imagining ships on the horizon. Yet I never felt safe until today." Poirot stood by her side. "Mon chéri, safety comes from within. This manor is beautiful, but its true beauty lies in the bonds you forge within its walls." They climbed a narrow staircase to the west wing, where murals of family gatherings once frayed by time had been restored. In one alcove stood a tall case once thought lost, the original tortoiseshell box, repolished and displayed. On a velvet cushion beneath protective glass, a small brass plaque read, "The Puzzle of the Box. A Lesson in Love and Loyalty, 1864. Ethel brushed her fingertips against the glass. "It seems odd to entomb it here. Shall we not open it once more for old times' sake?" Poirot smiled. "No, my dear, some mysteries are best left as reminders rather than reopened. Let it stand silent, a monument to what has passed and what endures." In the afternoon light, they reached the chapel at the manor's heart. Stained glass windows threw kaleidoscopic patterns upon the stone floor. Lord Ashcombe motioned them to kneel on crimson cushions. "Before we depart," he said quietly, "let us give thanks." As prayers were murmured, Poirot glanced toward the altar, where their small inscription in Latin read, "Veritas solvitur in fide." Truth is revealed in faith. He nodded, satisfied that the Ashcombes had found not only the truth of a puzzle box, but also the faith to bind them ever after. At dusk, a bonfire was lit in the courtyard. Torches flickered along the battlements, and the family gathered around, benches of oak and stone. A local fiddler played lively tunes, and plates of buttered scones and fruit preserves passed from hand to hand. Children chased one another beneath the torchlight, laughter echoing against stone. Poirot, with his cane planted firmly in the earth, watched the scene with gentle pride. He sipped a cup of steaming tea offered by Trevelyan. "Ah, mon ami," he whispered to Thaddeus the butler. "You have done well. Greystone is truly returned to life." Thaddeus inclined his head. "Thanks to Monsieur's guidance, sir, the family is at peace. That is the greatest legacy any house could wish for." As embers glowed under a star-spangled sky, Poirot lifted his chin and surveyed the revelry. Somewhere amid the laughter and music, he felt the pulse of history and the triumph of human forgiveness. And in that moment he knew that no greater mystery remained for him here, only the shared joy of a family reborn. Chapter 7. Echoes beneath the manor early morning sunlight filtered through the leaded windows of Greystone Manor, illuminating motes of dust dancing like centuries-old memories. In the West Wing corridor, Lady Penelope Ashcombe and her sister Ethel paused before a heavy oak door carved with ancestral crests. Beyond lay the neglected family archives, a trove of ledgers, letters, and relics that had been sealed since Dame Beatrice's death. Today, at Poirot's suggestion, they would unearth further truths, monsieur, Penelope murmured, glancing over her shoulder at the elegant detective. "Do you truly believe more secrets lie hidden here?" Poirot's green eyes sparkled. "Madam, every old house retains whispers in its walls. If Everard Vane's spirit still lingers, he may have concealed more than tokens in a box." He produced a slender brass key, the one that had opened the puzzle box, now repurposed for new discoveries. Ethel exhaled, steadying her nerves. "I half dread what we might find." Yet her curiosity prevailed. She fitted the key into the door's ancient lock, and with a gentle turn, the bolt released. With a soft click, the sisters crossed the threshold into a lofty chamber lined with dusty shelves and low stained-glass windows. A long table stood at the centre, cluttered with leather-bound volumes and faded maps. The air was thick with mildew and anticipation. Poirot stepped inside, closing the door behind them. "First," he said, "we must illuminate the archives." He waved to two footmen who had followed discreetly. They lit brass lanterns, casting a warm glow. As shadows retreated, the room revealed a tapestry depicting Greystone Manor at midsummer, its corridors teeming with horse-drawn carriages and masked revellers. Penelope traced a finger along the tapestry's edge. This was woven in 1863, the year before Everard disappeared. Her voice was tremulous. "What does it mean?" "Observe," Poirot replied, pointing to a discreet seam where the tapestry met the wall. Often, artisans hid compartments behind such artworks. He produced his ivory stylus and pressed it against a concealed latch. With a faint grinding sound, the panel swung inward, revealing a narrow recess. Inside lay a small iron chest, bound by rusted chains. Ethel's breath caught. "Another puzzle," she whispered. Poirot nodded, and with careful dexterity slipped the chest from its hiding place. He set it on the table and examined its surface. No keyhole, but 6 small depressions arranged in a circle. "A combination lock, perhaps," he mused. "We shall need to determine the correct sequence." Ethel frowned. "The number 6. Could it refer to a date?" Penelope's eyes lit. Everard vanished on June 14th, 1864. She leaned closer to the chest. 14, 6, 23. I'm not certain." Poirot tapped his chin. "Or perhaps 6 letters. Everar. No." He counted the depressions. 6 Yes, one for each letter in EVENTS. But that seems arbitrary. Hush. A soft rustle came from the back of the room. A large bookshelf stood slightly ajar. Thomas, the scullery boy, slipped forward, his face pale. "Monsieur, forgive me," he stammered. "I saw a ledger move. I thought it important." Poirot's gaze was gentle. "Lead us, Thomas." The boy approached the shelf and pressed against a particular volume. A leather-bound ledger titled Household Expenses, 1860–1870. With a creak, the shelf swung on hidden hinges, revealing a dark alcove beyond. Within lay a narrow desk piled with parchment and quills. In the glow of the lanterns, Ethel spotted a sealed envelope addressed to "My dearest Penelope," despite being written 150 years earlier. Her trembling hand broke the wax seal. Inside was a letter in Dame Beatrice's delicate script. "Penelope, if ever you seek the heart of this house, look not to soil nor stone, but to the year that first marked our lineage. Within the arch of the first letter lies the path to truth." Poirot paced before the ledger and the chest. The year that first marked our lineage refers to our family's founding in 1648, etched above the main entrance. He gestured to the archway outside through the window, and the first letter likely indicates the initial of that inscription. Penelope recalled the grand stone arch at the manor's entrance, bearing the Roman numerals MDCX maid. The first character is M. He returned to the iron chest and pressed the upper left depression labelled M, assuming the depressions were engraved with letters. With a clank, one chain loosened. One by one, Poirot selected letters. The next was D, then C, and so on, corresponding to MDCXLVIVVIIIX. He paused. The code must follow successive numerals, MDCXLVIIIIII. But that seems redundant. No, perhaps only the primary numerals, MDCXLV. He pressed those 6, and the chest's lid clicked open. Inside lay a delicate journal bound in crimson leather, the diary of Everard Vane. Ethel's eyes brimmed. This belonged to him. She opened the first page, where a pressed violet rested alongside the words, "To my confidant in life and beyond." The sisters exchanged a glance. Poirot closed the chest carefully. "Your family's past now speaks through this journal. Here you will find Everard's reflections, his love, his regrets, and perhaps the true reason he left." Ethel clutched the diary. "I never expected to hold his own words." Penelope rested a hand on her sister's shoulder. "We shall read it together, as sisters and heirs." Poirot bowed slightly. "And I shall await the revelations you discover. For in these pages the final secrets of Greyston Manor lie at last exposed." He paused at the door. "Mon ami, this puzzle has brought you even closer. May the echoes beneath these walls guide your future with wisdom and love." With the iron chest secured and the journal in their possession, the sisters stood united, ready to uncover the heart of their family's labyrinth, forever guided by the little grey cells of Hercule Poirot. Chapter 8. The Secrets of the Crimson. Journal late afternoon sunlight slanted through the tall mullioned windows of the family study, warming the leather armchairs and gilt picture frames with an amber glow. Penelope and Ethel Ashcombe sat at a long mahogany desk, the crimson leather journal of Everard Vane open between them. Hercule Poirot reclined nearby on a velvet chaise, his gloved fingers steepled before him, watching the sisters with keen interest. A tray of tea and biscuits lay untouched at his side. "Begin wherever you will," Poirot encouraged, his voice gentle. "The first pages often hold the key to understanding the whole." Penelope inhaled as she turned the brittle page. The dear ink, slightly faded but still legible, revealed Everard's elegant cursive, April 3rd, 1862. "My dearest Beatrice, today I set foot within these grand halls, and felt at once both honoured and outcast. The grandeur of Greystone dazzles, yet I see in every carving the weight of lineage and expectation. If I am to win her heart, I must first prove that I belong not by birth, but by sincerity." Ethel's hand trembled as she read. "He wrote, for her alone," she whispered. "He felt like an intruder." Poirot nodded. His heart was divided between his devotion to Beatrice and the demands of his family's name. Turning the page, Penelope continued, June 14th, 1864. "Today I received word that Papa has disinherited me for my friendship with Dame Beatrice. His words cut deeper than any blade. I depart for Bordeaux tomorrow, hoping to secure a small inheritance there. Only then can I return worthy of her affection." Ethel gasped softly. He left believing he was unworthy of her love. Penelope's eyes filled, and she, my great-grandmother, must have been heartbroken. Poirot inclined his head, and thus the puzzle box, a living testament to that rift. But let us press on. Page after page unfolded Everard's hopes and despairs. Letters he never sent, sketches of Beatrice's favourite rose, descriptions of moonlit strolls through the rose garden at Greystone, regrets at hiding his love beneath obligations. At page 43, Ethel paused. October 1st, 1865. My journey to Bordeaux yielded nothing but a pocket of debts. I write to you now from a traveller's inn, uncertain if I shall ever return. If you ever find this journal, know that my heart remained here at Greystone, and that my greatest regret is leaving you in doubt. Ethel's voice broke. He never came back. Penelope closed the journal and embraced her sister. He wrote those final words to her, but perhaps never mailed them. Poirot rose and crossed to the window, gazing out at the manicured lawns where deer grazed in the distance. Everard's last letters. Did you find a record of them among the original letters in the tortoiseshell box? Penelope shook her head. No, only those from 1864. Nothing beyond. Poirot tapped his chin. So the final pages of this journal were never entrusted to Beatrice. They remained hidden here, waiting for you to unlock them. Ethel took a deep breath and reopened the journal to the final entry, written in a hand shaken by emotion. November 12th, 1865. Tonight I cast these pages into the hearth, hoping the flames will carry my farewell and spare us both the pain of letterless goodbyes. Forgive me, my sweetest Beatrice. If ever you read these words, know that no distance, no silence could alter the depth of my devotion. Penelope covered her mouth. He destroyed the final testament of his love. Ethel closed her eyes, spared her the anguish of unanswered letters. Poirot approached the desk, and so the true legacy of Everard Vane is not an estate or title, but a love story forged in sacrifice. What remains is for you the living heirs, to decide how to honour it. Penelope reached into a small drawer and withdrew a polished wooden box engraved with a single rose. Inside lay the smouldering fragments of that final entry. Ethel gasped. "You preserved them?" Penelope nodded. "I felt it wrong to burn such a testament entirely. I rescued whatever I could." She handed a fragment to Ethel. Ethel traced a charred line of text with her fingertip. "Incul Heish still, depth of my devotion." She looked up, tears glistening. "We must keep these. They complete his story." Poirot smiled. "Indeed, mademoiselle, the final pieces of the puzzle. And now that you have the full narrative, from hopeful beginnings to selfless farewell, you can share Everard's truth with the world." Ethel wiped her cheeks and drew her sister into an embrace. "We will publish his journal, annotate it with family history, and dedicate the profits to restoring the rose garden he loved." Penelope's face lit with pride. "Yes, we shall invite the villagers to plant new roses in his memory every spring." Poirot raised his teacup. "To Everard Vane, whose love transcended expectation, and to the Ashcombe sisters, who have unearthed the heart of Greystone Manor." They toasted, quietly, as the sun sank lower, casting long shadows across the study. Poirot reflected on the human heart's resilience. "Mon ami," he murmured, "in every story there lies a moment when the past and present merge. You have lived that moment today." The sisters closed the crimson journal and placed it reverently on the desk. Outside, the first stars emerged, as if bearing witness to a love story that had endured beyond time, and to the family who would now carry its light into the future. Chapter 9. Blossoms of Remembrance. A week later, Greystone Manor's rose garden was transformed into a tapestry of colour, each new bud a testament to Everard Vane's enduring passion. Dawn found Hercule Poirot standing beneath a newly tended arbour of climbing roses, their pale pink petals unfurling like silk. The sisters Penelope and Ethel Ashcombe stood at his side, their faces radiant with anticipation. "All is ready, monsieur," Ethel said softly, smoothing the hem of her summer dress. "The villagers have gathered by the garden gate, and the press awaits our remarks." Poirot adjusted his lapel brooch, the tortoiseshell rose she had gifted him, and inhaled the subtle fragrance around him. "Ah, the perfume of hope and memory," he murmured. "It is fitting, mademoiselle, that Everard's story culminates here, among the blossoms he cherished." Penelope smiled. "We named this new variety Beatrice's Heart in his honour. The first saplings are ready to plant." She gestured toward a row of clay pots, each cradling a young rosebush with tightly furled buds. At the garden's edge, the local vicar, Reverend Fletcher, prepared to speak. Behind him, villagers of all ages hovered, some in Sunday best, others in cheerful sun hats. A small brass plaque, bearing Everard's name and the date 1864 forever in bloom, awaited unveiling on a granite pedestal. Reverend Fletcher cleared his throat. "Friends of Greystone Manor, we gather today to celebrate love across the ages. Everard Vane's sacrifice, hidden for a century and a half, reminds us that true devotion bears the sweetest fruit." His words carried on a gentle breeze, and a hush fell over the crowd. Poirot stepped forward, cane held lightly in one hand. "Dear friends," he began in his unmistakable accent, "we have unearthed a tale that transcends time, a love so profound that even silence could not extinguish its flame. This garden, planted with each sister's careful hand, stands as living proof that memory and compassion endure together." A ripple of applause met his speech. Penelope took the stage next, her voice firm yet kindly. "Everard's journal taught us that the smallest gestures, a pressed violet, a hidden key, can change destinies. May these roses remind us to cherish the stories passed down through generations and to forge our own legacies of kindness." Ethel stepped up to unveil the plaque. With a practised flourish, she pulled back the velvet cloth. The brass gleamed in the morning sun, and a solitary bee settled on the engraved letter E, as if to lend its own blessing. As Reverend Fletcher blessed the garden, villagers stepped forward to plant their roses. Children laughed as they dug small holes. Adults murmured prayers, and Penelope and Ethel guided each hand gently into the earth. Poirot watched, his little grey cells content in the knowledge that a puzzle had yielded healing rather than harm. When the last sapling was planted, the sisters led Poirot toward a secluded bench beneath an ancient yew. A leather-bound portfolio lay upon it. Everard's sketches of the original rose garden, recently discovered inside the journal's final pages. Each drawing was tinted with watercolours, still vivid after so many years. "Look, monsieur," Penelope said, pointing to a sketch labelled Moonlight Path. This was the very walkway where Everard first declared his love. She traced the winding trail with her finger. "I intend to restore it by lamplight in autumn, so visitors may feel the same enchantment." Ethel turned the pages, revealing a map of secret nooks among the hedge maze, and notes on planting midnight blue hyacinths to complement the roses. "He dreamed of a garden that would bloom both day and night," she whispered. "We must fulfill it." Poirot nodded, his gaze thoughtful. "A project worthy of Greystone's legacy, and through your care both garden and story shall blossom anew." He paused, then added with gentle humour, "But be sure to leave a puzzle or two behind, mademoiselle, else how will another Poirot find his way here?" They laughed together, joined in a moment of quiet camaraderie. Overhead, the sun climbed higher, illuminating petals and faces alike. The breeze stirred the notes of children's voices, mingling with birdsong and the distant toll of the manor's clock tower. As the ceremony drew to a close, Reverend Fletcher offered a final benediction, and villagers drifted into the gardens, winding paths to admire the blooms. Poirot lingered a moment, touching a pale rose with the tip of his cane, and whispered, "To the mysteries of love, and to those who dare to solve them." With that, he straightened his bowler hat and followed the sisters back toward the manor, leaving behind a garden alive with colour, remembrance, and the promise of secrets yet to find their bloom. Chapter 10. A Whisper Through Time-Late Afternoon. Sunlight spilled through the tall, mullioned windows of Greystone Manor's drawing-room, gilding the portraits of ancestors long departed. The party assembled here, Lord and Lady Ashcombe, Cyril, Ethel, Mrs. Trevelyan, Thomas, and Monsieur Poirot, had just concluded a celebratory tea in honour of the new rose garden. Now, an unexpected hush settled over the company, as all awaited Poirot's pronouncement following his private consultation with the housekeeper. Poirot stood beside the marble fireplace, his gloved hands clasped behind his back. A single brass key, smaller and simpler than any they had encountered, rested on the mantel beside him. Every eye in the room was fixed upon him. "Mes amis," he began, his voice soft yet steely. "Our journey through the puzzles of Greystone has revealed letters, portraits, journals, and even hidden chests. And yet I sensed that one final secret remained, one not of mechanics, but of the heart." Lord Ashcombe nodded. "You hinted at something yesterday, Poirot. Pray tell us what you discovered." Poirot inclined his head. "After our garden ceremony, I requested the housekeeper to search the library for any volumes that had gone unnoticed. Among the earliest folios of the Ashcombe archives, she found a slender volume, bound in blue velvet and locked with this very key." He paused, lifting the key so that the afternoon light caught its simple brass surface. "We have not yet used it." Ethel leaned forward. "A lock we have never seen before. What does it conceal?" Poirot smiled faintly. "Be patient, mademoiselle. First, I must recall to you the inscription over this room's door. 'In remembrance, truth endures.' Does it not suggest that memory itself may be the threshold to revelation?" Lady Ashcombe's eyes misted. "Surely you do not mean recollections to open a locked book?" "Precisely," replied Poirot. "Let us consider how Beatrice Ashcombe commemorated her beloved Everard after his final disappearance. She ordered that her husband's first gift to her, this journal, be locked away, and that its counterpart, a memoir composed by her own hand, be bound separately. I surmise that memoir may reside within these walls, waiting for the proper unlocking." He turned and pressed a hidden catch on the bookcase behind him. A panel swung inward, revealing a narrow alcove lined with shelves. On the middle shelf, amid leather-bound tomes, stood the blue velvet volume. Poirot retrieved it and placed it on the low table at centre room. "Now, to open it," he murmured. He handed the brass key to Penelope. "Madam, only one who knows the secret of love and loss can guide the key to its heart. Will you try?" Penelope took the key, her hands trembling. She inserted it into a tiny keyhole at the book's spine and turned. The lock clicked, and the cover fell open to reveal gilded edges and ivory pages. She lifted the lid with reverence. Gasps filled the room as the pages fanned open to reveal miniature watercolour paintings. Portraits of Beatrice and Everard, side by side, their faces radiant with joy. Below each image, in Beatrice's graceful hand, were dedications and reflections. "To Tess, my dearest Everard, whose courage outshone the rank he bore. Though parted in body, we remain united in spirit." Ethel stepped forward to peer at the first page. "These are the memoirs of Beatrice herself." Poirot nodded. "She wrote not only of her grief, but of the hope that sustained her. Here, my friends, lies her chronology of love. The day they first met, silent vows beneath the moonlight, and the final promise to honour his memory by living fully and forgiving all." As each verse was read aloud, the drawing-room seemed to glow with an otherworldly warmth. Thomas pressed a hand to his chest. Mrs. Trevelyan dabbed at her eyes. Even Cyril's usual impassivity melted into emotion. Poirot closed the volume and addressed the company. "Beatrice's memoir completes the circle. Everard's voice in the Crimson Journal spoke of departure and regret. Here, his beloved's words transform sorrow into strength. Together, their narratives teach us that love's true puzzle is not how to bind or hide one's heart, but how to set it free. Lady Ashcombe rose, her eyes bright. We must publish these memoirs alongside Everard's journal, so that the world may know the full tapestry of their devotion. Ethel clasped her sister's hand. And we shall include these watercolours in the new edition as living testimony to their union. Cyril stepped to the table, gently touching the painted scene of Beatrice and Everard's graduation from Cambridge, both dressed in gowns, arms linked. This image alone tells of equality and shared dreams. Poirot's moustaches twitched with satisfaction. Indeed, mon ami, their legacy shall encourage others to cherish memory and courage in equal measure. He turned to Thomas and Trevelyan. And you, who served faithfully, know the importance of keeping secrets that uplift rather than destroy. Thomas bowed. I understand, monsieur. Trevelyan smiled through tears. I shall serve Greystone with redoubled loyalty. Poirot returned his gaze to Penelope and Ethel. Mesdemoiselles Ashcombe, you have honoured the past by illuminating it. Now, your future beckons, guided by both heart and history. Penelope closed the blue velvet volume and fastened it with a silk ribbon. Thank you, Monsieur Poirot, for unlocking every door, both physical and emotional. With that, Poirot gathered his cane and coat. He paused in the doorway, looking back at the reunited family. Remember, he said, in all puzzles of life, the smallest key may open the greatest heart. And with a final nod, he stepped into the corridor, leaving Greystone Manor at peace, its story forever complete. Chapter 11. The Chronicles Shared. A fortnight after the blue velvet memoir was unlocked, the great library of Greystone Manor hummed with quiet excitement. Rich mahogany shelves lined every wall, and on the central table sat 2 leather-bound volumes, Everard Vane's Crimson Journal and Dame Beatrice's blue velvet memoir, bound together at last under a single silk ribbon. Visitors gathered among plush armchairs and brass reading lamps, their murmurs of anticipation echoing beneath the vaulted ceiling. Penelope Ashcombe stood at the head of the table, her poise dignified yet warm. She had donned a simple gown of pale rose satin, matching the petals in the newly planted garden. Beside her, Ethel held a stack of invitation letters to this small circle. Local dignitaries, close family friends, and the publisher, Mr. Horace Winthrop. A polished brass nameplate declared this first presentation of the Chronicles of Everard and Beatrice. Thank you all for coming, Penelope began, voice calm but resonant. These pages contain the heart of our family's history. Tonight we share what was once hidden, so that love and memory may guide us forward. She swept her gaze across the guests, Lord Ashcombe, Cyril, Mrs. Trevelyan, Thomas the scullery boy, now promoted to lodge attendant, Reverend Fletcher, and the Manor's long-time housekeeper, Mrs. Wellington. Mr. Winthrop stepped forward, adjusting his pince-nez. Madam, it is rare to receive such a treasure. 2 first-hand accounts of devotion and resolve. We shall see to their careful editing, annotation, and printing, and we pledge that proceeds will support the Manor's restoration and endow a Scholarship in Everard Vane's name. Polite applause rippled through the guests, mingled with murmurs of approval. Ethel cleared her throat. "I shall oversee the illustrations," she announced, indicating the miniature watercolours preserved in the memoir. Each chapter will feature a vignette of Everard and Dame Beatrice's journey. The moonlit rose garden, the hidden archives, the turning tide by the Thames. Her eyes shone with purpose. "It is as though we resurrect the past through art." Cyril, ever pragmatic, added, "I have arranged for a limited edition of 100 copies, hand-numbered and signed. Future historians will find these volumes a valuable window into the Victorian era." He smiled, leaning against a carved oak pillar. "And when the world grows weary of scandalous gossip, they may yet appreciate a true tale of sacrifice." Poirot sat quietly in a wingback chair, his fingers drumming the armrest. His lapel undulated with the tortoiseshell rose brooch he had worn since leaving London. At last he rose, cane in hand. "Mes amis," he said, his voice carrying both gravity and gentle humour, "I have but one small contribution." From his pocket he produced a polished wooden pen engraved with the Ashcombe crest. "May you use this to sign every edition. Let it remind readers that behind every great story stands the hand of loyalty and of honour." Penelope accepted the pen, touching its cool surface. "Monsieur Poirot, we are in your debt. Without your little grey cells, these chronicles would have remained sealed forever." She paused, meeting his gaze. "You must write your own memoir one day, one of puzzles solved and hearts restored." He bowed, moustaches quivering. "Perhaps, madam, but for now I prefer to leave my stories in the minds of those I serve." He stepped back as Mrs. Wellington brought in trays of petits fours and crystal glasses of elderflower champagne. "And now," he added with a twinkle, "let us toast to the enduring power of love, and to new beginnings." Glasses were raised. The golden liquid caught the lamplight, and each guest drank deeply. Mrs. Trevelyan dabbed at her cheek, moved by the memory of her missteps and redemption. Thomas grinned shyly, proud of his promotion and of serving at this grand event. Cyril clinked his glass against Ethel's, laughter dancing in his eyes. As the soirée continued, Penelope and Ethel slipped aside to examine the library's tall windows, where twilight folded itself into the glass. "Sister," Penelope whispered, "do you feel as though Everard is here with us tonight?" Ethel smiled, her hand finding Penelope's. "In every word we read, and every blossom that blooms, he remains. We shall carry him in our work, and in our hearts." They embraced under the watchful portraits of their ancestors, as if welcoming back a long-lost kin. Across the room, Poirot paused at the library door, watching the sisters. He sensed that the puzzles of Greystone Manor had evolved into something greater, a living legacy, shared with honesty and art. With one final nod of satisfaction, he exited into the night, ready for the next whisper of mystery that would call his name. Chapter 12. The Trust of Everard. Late morning light filtered through the leaded glass of Greystone Manor's morning room, where Penelope and Ethel Ashcombe sat before a small writing desk. Between them lay a folded parchment sealed with the familiar heart and vine motif. It had been discovered only last night, tucked into the back cover of Beatrice's memoir beneath the velvet lining. Poirot, summoned for one final consultation, stood patiently by the window, cane in hand, watching the sisters break the seal. Penelope unfolded the letter with trembling fingers. The paper bore Everard Vane's spidery script, and began simply, "My dearest Beatrice, if these words survive me, then know that my greatest hope was to leave not only words but deeds of kindness. Within my modest inheritance in Bordeaux lies a sum earmarked for those without voice or home. I entrust you, and your heirs thereafter, to see it applied wisely." Ethel glanced up, astonished. "He established a charitable trust." Her voice caught. "But we knew nothing of this." Penelope continued reading. "The fund must aid education for village children, and should any Ashcombe in future falter in duty, they must remind themselves of mercy before power. May this gift bind Greystone to its people in gratitude and purpose." Poirot stepped forward, eyes bright. "Mon Dieu, a final gift of the heart, and one that reaches beyond these walls." He bent to examine the parchment's margins. "And I see here the ledger's location, vault beneath the west wing staircase. We must inspect it post-haste." Together they left the morning room and retraced their steps down the west wing. At the foot of the stairs, Ethel found a concealed panel, its lock engraved with the same intertwined V and B motif. Penelope inserted the brass key from Beatrice's memoir, and with a quiet click, the panel swung open to reveal a stone-lined alcove. Inside stood a small lockbox, its lid bearing a brass plaque, "Everard's Promise, 1865. Cyril, who had joined them in the corridor at Poirot's summons, cleared his throat. "I only learned of this today. I feel proud of our ancestor." He knelt to unlock the box and lifted its lid. Within lay several worn banknotes, a numbered bond certificate from Bordeaux, and a folded will bearing Everard's signature and that of 2 witnesses. Ethel unfolded the certificate, eyes wide. His property in Bordeaux was substantial. He must have paid off debts before dedicating this fund. She glanced at Penelope. "Do you realize what this means? Greystone Manor could support a lasting school for the village." Penelope placed a hand on Cyril's shoulder. Everard's wish was education for children, especially those of humble means. She looked to Poirot. "Monsieur, your counsel has guided us through puzzles both material and emotional. Will you help advise on fulfilling this trust?" Poirot bowed. "With the greatest pleasure, madam. A mystery that ends in hope is the sweetest of all." He turned to Cyril and Ethel. "The first step is to appoint trustees, perhaps Reverend Fletcher and Mrs. Wellington, whose devotion to the community is unquestioned." He nodded toward the corridor. "Let us summon them." Within the half-hour, the vicar and housekeeper stood respectfully before the open box. Reverend Fletcher read the will aloud, his voice resonating in the quiet hall. "I, Everard Vane, do bequeath the net proceeds of my Bordeaux holdings to the Ashcombe family, in trust to establish and maintain the Greystone Educational Fund, for the benefit of village children. Let mercy temper privilege, and may learning flourish where once only stones stood silent." Mrs. Wellington dabbed her eyes. "I cannot think of a finer legacy," she whispered. Reverend Fletcher cleared his throat. "We accept this solemn responsibility on behalf of the Ashcombe lineage and the village of Little Greystone. He raised his hand in benediction. May this fund bring light where shadows linger. As the adults discussed logistics, initial grants, legal counsel, enrollment plans, Poirot slipped away to the garden, pausing beneath the arbour of Beatrice's heart roses. He surveyed the blooms with satisfaction, petals bright, thorns few. Behind him, the laughter of children echoed from the courtyard, drawn by the promise of education soon to begin. A gentle breeze carried the rose's perfume, and Poirot mused, aloud, indeed the greatest puzzle is solved when one's legacy unites, rather than divides. He touched a pale bud with his cane-tip. Everard Vane would be proud. Returning to the morning room, Poirot found Penelope gazing at the ledger and certificate. She closed the box and lifted her eyes to him. "Thank you, Monsieur Poirot, for guiding us through each mystery, tangibles and intangibles alike. Greystone has found its purpose at last." Poirot smiled, his moustaches quivering. "Madame, it is families like yours that make my work worthwhile. The true inheritance is not wealth or land, but the chance to do good with what we possess." He gathered his cane and coat. As he prepared to depart, Cyril and Ethel escorted him to the front door. The sky above Greystone Manor was a brilliant blue, the air alive with birdsong and distant church bells. Poirot paused on the threshold, gazing at the ivy-clad façade. "Mon ami," he said softly, "may this trust flourish for centuries, as the roses you planted bloom each spring, and may the children of Little Greystone learn that puzzles, even of life and loss, can be unravelled with compassion and courage." With that, Poirot tipped his hat and stepped into the sunlit drive, leaving behind a family and a manor forever transformed by love, forgiveness, and a promise carried through time. Chapter 13. The First Lesson. A pale autumn sun filtered through the tall sash windows of the newly restored classroom at Greystone Manor's east wing. Rows of polished oak desks gleamed beneath the high ceiling, and the scent of chalk and polished wood mingled with the faint perfume of fallen leaves drifting in from the open windows. Today was the inaugural day of the Greystone Educational Fund, and Penelope Ashcombe stood at the head of the class, her heart fluttering like the pages of Everard's journal. "Good morning, children," she began with a warm smile, addressing a group of 20 village youngsters neatly seated before her. Their faces were a blend of excitement and nervousness, some clutching hand-me-down satchels, others tracing the carved initials on the desk edges. "Welcome to your first lesson at Greystone Manor." Ethel, standing at Penelope's side, handed out small notebooks bound in blue leather, each imprinted with a golden rose emblem. "These," she announced softly, "are your journals. You will write here every day about what you learn, and perhaps one day your own stories will inspire future generations." A ripple of delight passed through the children. One bright-eyed boy raised his hand. "Miss Ashcombe, will we study history?" Penelope nodded. "Indeed. You will learn about our village, the manor's past, and the courage of those, like Everard and Dame Beatrice, who believed in learning for all." She paused, meeting Ethel's gaze. "And we shall begin with a tale of two hearts." Ethel opened the window a crack and called softly outside, "Reverend Fletcher, Would you join us for worship before the day's lessons?" Within moments, the kindly vicar entered, carrying a small wooden cross and his well-worn Bible. He arranged himself at the side of the blackboard and greeted the children with a gentle "Good morning," as Reverend Fletcher offered a brief prayer of gratitude for knowledge and community. The children bowed their heads. Poirot, who had arrived unseen and taken a seat in the back row, observed the scene with a serene expression. He tapped his cane lightly, as though conducting an unseen rhythm, while Trevelyan, now the school's administrator, ensured that every child had a seat and a slate. When the prayer ended, Ethel stepped forward. "Today's story," she began, "is about Everard Vane, a young man who loved learning as much as you do." She glanced at the portrait of Everard and Beatrice hanging above the chalk shelf. Everard believed that knowledge should not be sealed away, but shared freely. She retold the tale of the locked tortoiseshell box, the hidden journals, and the puzzle that united a family. And in her voice the children heard wonder and the promise of discovery. Penelope then conducted a geography lesson using a large map of the British Isles pinned to the wall. She traced the route from London to Bordeaux, the journey Everard had undertaken, and invited the children to find their own village on the map. Murmurs of recognition rose as little fingers pointed to Greystone. "You live in a place of history," Penelope told them, "and now your futures can be shaped by what you learn here." The morning moved to arithmetic. Ethel chalked simple sums on the blackboard. If Everard saved $50 and spent $18 on books, how much remained for his journey? A chorus of correct answers, 32, reflected the children's enthusiasm. Poirot rose and strolled to the front. "Bravo, mes enfants!" he applauded. "Numbers are like puzzles. Each digit holds significance until you discern the pattern." After pacing the room with approving nods, Poirot beckoned two children forward. He handed them a small box inscribed with the intertwined V and B motif. "Let us practice one more puzzle," he said, smiling. "Inside this box lies a clue to today's secret lesson." The children exchanged excited glances. Poirot showed them that the box required sliding panels to open, just like the puzzle box once handled by Mrs. Ashcombe. With giggles and concentration, the children manipulated the panels until the box snapped open, revealing a slip of paper bearing the words, "Curiosity is the key to all doors." Ethel retrieved the slip and read it aloud. "Curiosity is the key to all doors." She turned to the class. "Never forget that, dear students. Ask questions, explore ideas, and you will unlock the world's wonders." As the children broke into applause and high fives, Penelope and Ethel exchanged proud looks. Even Mrs. Trevelyan blinked back tears of joy, having witnessed the transformation from maid to school administrator. Poirot returned to his seat, leaning back to savour the moment. He whispered to no one in particular, "The next generation carries forth the legacy. Mon cœur est content." At midday, the children lined up outside under a canopy of golden leaves for a simple picnic of bread, cheese, and fresh apples from the manor orchard. Laughter echoed across the lawn as they shared lessons, jokes, and dreams of future marvels. Cyril wandered among them, jotting down observations in a leather notebook of his own, already planning how to document this grand experiment for local newspapers and posterity. Before departing, the children presented Penelope and Ethel with a bouquet of wildflowers. One youngster offered Penelope a pressed violet, reminiscent of the token Everard had sent to Dame Beatrice so long ago. Penelope accepted it with a smile. "Thank you," she said softly. "In every lesson, in every bloom, your curiosity and kindness will keep Everard's promise alive." As the sun climbed higher, Poirot gathered his cane and tiptoed away, leaving the sisters surrounded by the joyful sounds of learning and remembrance. The puzzle of Greystone Manor had grown into something far greater, a living classroom where every child could unlock their own destiny, one question at a time. Chapter 14. Shadows on the Horizon. A week had passed since the inaugural lesson in the East Wing classroom, and Greystone Manor hummed with purpose and promise. Early morning mist still clung to the rose-laced paths when Hercule Poirot arrived at the manor, summoned by a terse note from Penelope Ashcombe. He found her in the library, her face drawn with concern as she stood over the central table, where papers lay scattered like autumn leaves. "Monsieur Poirot," she greeted him softly, closing a ledger as he stepped inside. "Thank you for coming so promptly. We have encountered a complication." Poirot raised an eyebrow. "Complication, madam? At Greystone, I expected only the triumph of education and charity." Penelope gestured towards the ledger. "Look here." She pointed at a marked entry. The initial fund disbursement to the village school, £500, had been recorded twice. Either an accounting error or someone has tampered with the records. Worse still, yesterday the treasury box was found unlocked. Poirot's little grey cells sprang to life. "Unlocked, you say, and nothing taken. Nothing missing yet. But the box was ajar when I opened the morning window. I fear someone tested the lock." She met his gaze. "I summoned you to investigate discreetly. We cannot alarm the trustees or the villagers." "Très bien," Poirot replied. He examined the scattered papers, noting pristine handwriting and smudged imprints where ink had been erased. "Madame Trevelyan, Reverend Fletcher and Mrs. Wellington must remain a part of this inquiry, for they alone hold keys to the treasury." Penelope nodded, beckoning the housekeeper and vicar into the room. Trevelyan, now impeccably attired in administrative black, curtsied and passed a trembling glance to Reverend Fletcher, whose kindly eyes widened behind his spectacles. Poirot addressed them gently. "Mes amis, pray recount your recollections of yesterday's events. Trevelyan, you unlocked the box for the village stipend." Trevelyan held her hands together. "Yes, monsieur. I used my master key at dawn, per procedure. I then sealed it with wax and locked it. When I returned after breakfast, I found the seal cracked." "And the funds?" the vicar added. "Intact?" "Intact," Trevelyan confirmed. "But the lock was forced." Reverend Fletcher cleared his throat. "I accompanied 2 villagers to collect their grants. They left after expressing gratitude. Then I returned to the chapel before joining Mrs. Wellington at the bake sale in the courtyard." Poirot steepled his fingers. "So, the window, madame, was open. Perhaps the first invitation to an intruder. Let us inspect." He led the group to the window sill. A faint smudge on the sill caught his eye. A partial leather fingerprint, too small for any of the staff. Poirot produced a clean cloth and carefully dabbed the spot. This, I believe, is our first clue." Penelope inhaled sharply. "But whose print is this? Monsieur Ashcombe's valet, perhaps, or an opportunist from the village." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "We must broaden our circle." He requested to see the visitors' register at the garden gate. Ethel, who had been quietly observing from the doorway, retrieved the book. Entries for the past 3 days numbered dozens. Suppliers, journalists, and a curious name. Lawrence Beaumont, self-described art collector, who signed in on the morning of the attempted opening. Poirot studied the signature. "Beaumont, I have heard of him. A dealer in antiquities with a shady reputation." He looked to Penelope. "Did you arrange any appointments with such a gentleman?" Penelope frowned. "No, but yesterday afternoon he arrived unannounced, saying he sought to view the watercolour sketches for potential purchase. I agreed to show him the portfolio after luncheon." Ethel gasped. "He was here then?" "Precisely," Poirot said, nodding, "and perhaps tempted by the vault's treasures, a collection of rare ledgers and documents catalogued in the archives below." He turned back to the vicar and Trevelyan. "You recollect his features?" The vicar stroked his chin. Tall, greying at the temples, moustache waxed to points. He carried a small leather satchel. Poirot's face lit. "Ah, his satchel. We must find it. Perhaps it bears traces of lock-picking tools." He instructed Ethel to retrieve any forgotten items from the portfolio room, while he and Thomas, now lodge attendant, searched Beaumont's satchel, found abandoned near the rose arbour. Moments later, Thomas returned with the satchel, its flap ajar. Inside lay a small set of brass picks, a notebook with sketches of the manor's west wing staircase, and an old photograph of Greystone's vault door. Poirot examined each item methodically. "Monsieur, Beaumont planned this intrusion for weeks," he declared. "He studied the vault's mechanism and probed the lock. His purpose? Likely theft of valuable manuscripts or the trust funds themselves." Penelope pressed her lips together. "We must confront him." "Non," Poirot replied. "We must catch him in the act. This evening at dusk, when the fundraising gala concludes, Beaumont shall attempt a second visit. I propose we arrange a trap." That night, Greystone's gala in the great hall overflowed with music and laughter. Poirot stationed Trevelyan and Thomas at the locked treasury door, ready to call the household. He himself mingled, feigning disinterest, while Penelope and Ethel welcomed guests under glittering chandeliers. As the clock struck 9, a subtle clink echoed through a side corridor. Poirot excused himself, and, accompanied by the vicar, crept toward the noise. There, in the moonlit corridor, Lawrence Beaumont knelt before the treasury door, pick set in motion. "Bonsoir, monsieur," Poirot pronounced, stepping from the shadows. Beaumont started, dropping his tools with a clatter. "Monsieur Poirot," he stammered, I only meant to borrow a ledger for authentication. I had no ill intent." Poirot's gaze was implacable. "Your tools speak differently. You shall remain until the constable arrives." He tapped Beaumont's satchel. "And you will explain to the authorities your true designs." As Beaumont was escorted away, the echo of his footsteps faded. Poirot returned to the gala, where Penelope embraced him gratefully. "Another puzzle solved, monsieur," she whispered. "I owe you more than words." Poirot smiled, moustaches twitching. "Madame, the true treasure is that Greystone's trust remains unbroken. But remember, shadows may linger on the horizon. One must ever keep the little grey cells vigilant." And with that, he raised his glass to the family's enduring light, ready for whatever mystery tomorrow might bring. Chapter 15. The Watcher in the Gallery. Late morning sunlight filtered through the arched windows of Greystone Manor's picture gallery, illuminating rows of ancestral portraits whose eyes seemed to follow every visitor. Hercule Poirot moved deliberately between canvases, examining gilded frames and painted visages with careful scrutiny. Penelope Ashcombe and Ethel flanked him, each carrying a small notebook to record his observations. "Madame, mademoiselle," Poirot began, "the criminal mind often hides in plain sight. Yesterday's affair with Monsieur Beaumont revealed a very human weakness for valuables. Yet I sense another subtle intrigue, one painted into these walls themselves." Penelope frowned. "You mean someone here is using the gallery as a hiding place?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Not hiding, madam. Watching. Note the portrait of Dame Beatrice as a young woman, third from the east. Her gaze is directed toward the far corner, where no window nor door exists. Why would an artist position her to look so intently at emptiness?" Ethel approached the canvas, cheeks flushed with curiosity. Perhaps simply a stylistic flourish. "At first glance, yes," Poirot replied. "But if we follow her line of sight, we find the portrait of Everard, just opposite, glancing back. Two souls in conversation across decades." He tapped his cane against the floor. "Between these two stands the alcove to the original archives. What if someone has used this axis to conceal an object?" Penelope's brow furrowed. "Just beyond those portraits lies an empty niche, where once stood a marble urn. We removed it during restoration for safekeeping." "Exactly," said Poirot. He pointed. "Let us inspect." They crossed to the niche. Ethel shone a lantern into its depths. "Nothing here but an iron ring set into the back wall." Poirot knelt and ran his gloved finger along the seam between the plaster and the panelling. A hidden compartment. He pressed the ring, and the niche's panel swung forward, revealing a narrow hollow lined with velvet. Inside lay a folded serviette tied with blue ribbon, Beatrice's wedding handkerchief, embroidered with her initials, and a date, July 2nd, 1859. Penelope gasped. "And this belonged to my great-grandmother on her wedding day. Why was it hidden here?" Poirot rose, holding the serviette with reverence. "To conceal a confession. Note that it is the only textile in the gallery. Every other relic is on display. Below, a handkerchief would go unnoticed by most." Ethel untied the ribbon and unfolded the cloth. Stained into the fibres was a single word, faintly stitched in purple silk. "Remember, I believe this is an instruction," Poirot observed. "Remember what, though? The archives hold Everard's diary and Beatrice's memoir. But perhaps, and another document, one that has remained unseen, contains the key to a final riddle." Penelope's eyes shone. "You mean something beyond the memoir and journal? A third testament?" Monsieur Beaumont sought only monetary gain, but the true treasure here is knowledge. Poirot leaned toward the velvet lining. "Look, here is a folded sheet of parchment. Carefully. Ethel extracted the parchment with soft fingers. Unfolded, it revealed a short proclamation in Dame Beatrice's hand. By my hand, I bequeath the rights to the heraldic crest of Ashcombe lineage to any who prove themselves honourable, cherishes both the manor and its people. Below were the signatures of her husband and 2 witnesses. Penelope read aloud, "This declares that the family crest may pass to a worthy guardian. Beyond mere bloodline, it elevates moral conduct above inheritance." Poirot nodded. "A final lesson. The lineage you uphold is not only genetic, but ethical. This hidden testament was placed here to remind future heirs that true nobility lies in action." Ethel's voice trembled. A commoner who served faithfully could claim the crest, if they embody its values. "Precisely," said Poirot. "Mrs. Trevelyan, Thomas, even Reverend Fletcher may bear this honour." He turned to Penelope. "And you, madame, must decide who among you best embodies Ashcombe virtues." Penelope exhaled, eyes misting. "This is a beautiful testament. I shall form a council, including villagers, to choose the guardian of the crest." Poirot smiled, his moustaches quivering. "An act of shared governance, worthy of your family's legacy. And now the gallery's watcher can rest. It's silent, conversation finally understood." As afternoon light faded, the 3 closed the niche and reaffixed the marble urn to its place. The portrait seemed to smile in quiet approval. Poirot, pleased that another secret had been unearthed without discord, patted his pockets for his handkerchief. Ethel laughed softly. "You carry your own little grey cells everywhere, monsieur." He bowed. "And they have yielded yet another puzzle solved. Mon cœur est content." With the hidden testament secured and a new chapter begun for Greystone Manor, the Ashcombes and their allies departed the gallery, hand in hand, ready to honour the virtues that would guide their future. Chapter 16. The Council of the Crest a fortnight after the hidden proclamation was discovered, a crisp autumn morning found Greystone Manor's great hall transformed into an assembly chamber. Long oak benches faced a raised dais, upon which stood Lady Penelope Ashcombe's polished lectern. Banners bearing the Ashcombe heraldic crest, an intertwined rose and lion, hung from the walls, each swaying gently in the soft breeze flowing through open windows. Villagers, household staff and family members filled the hall, their faces alight with curiosity and anticipation. At the centre, a table held the sealed testament and a single silver chalice, symbolic of unity. Penelope Ashcombe rose and tapped the lectern. Murmurs hushed into reverent silence. "Friends and neighbours," she began, voice steady yet warm, "we gather today to fulfil Dame Beatrice's final decree, to entrust the Ashcombe crest not solely by birth, but by virtue. We honour her wish by forming a council of the crest, tasked with selecting a guardian among those who uphold our shared values." A respectful applause rose, and Penelope gestured to Reverend Fletcher, standing beside her. "Reverend Fletcher, will you lead our invocation?" The kindly vicar bowed his head and offered a brief prayer of gratitude and guidance. As his final words faded, Penelope motioned to her sister. "Ethel will explain the selection process." Ethel stepped forward, her gaze sweeping the hall. "Council members, please stand." 4 individuals rose. Mrs. Wellington, whose unwavering service had secured village trust. Thomas, now promoted to steward of the archives. Dr. Langley, the village physician renowned for his compassion. And Master Clark, the schoolmaster praised for his dedication to the children. These four shall deliberate and by majority nominate our crest's guardian. Thomas straightened his shoulders. I am humbled. Mrs. Wellington nodded, and Dr. Langley exchanged a determined glance with Master Clark. They took their places around the table, behind the chalice and the testament. Poirot, seated in the gallery overlooking the hall, observed with keen interest his little grey cells whirred as he recognized the gravity of this moment. A test not of riddles, but of character. He tapped his cane lightly against the stone balustrade, ready to offer counsel should doubts arise. Penelope cleared her throat. Before you open the testament, I ask each candidate to speak briefly on what the crest represents to them, and how they intend to honour its legacy. She nodded to Mrs. Wellington. The housekeeper stepped forward, her neat uniform complemented by a soft smile. She addressed the assembly. The Ashcombe crest symbolises unity between manor and village. As guardian, I would ensure that our charitable trust continues to enrich children's lives, and that every earnest request for help is met with both compassion and dignity. Applause greeted her words. Next, Thomas, pale yet resolute, spoke. And I have long served in shadows, preserving history and secrets. If honoured with the crest, I would safeguard our records and open archives for scholars and villagers alike, so that Greystone's lessons inform future generations. His sincerity drew nods of approval. Dr. Langley approached. Medicine demands trust and empathy. With the crest, I pledge to expand free clinics for those who cannot afford care, and to train young apprentices in the healing arts, thus embodying mercy and action. Murmurs of support rose. Lastly, Master Clark adjusted his spectacles. Education is the cornerstone of freedom. As guardian, I would build upon the educational fund to establish scholarships for promising students and adult classes for parents, because wisdom should never be confined to age or status. The gallery burst into applause. Penelope lifted her hand. Thank you. Counsel, you may now open the testament. Reverend Fletcher handed the sealed parchment to Mrs. Wellington, who passed it to Thomas. He unrolled it with care and read once, more Dame Beatrice's words aloud, reminding all present of the solemn responsibility. Council members retired to the dais to confer privately, leaving the hall in eager quiet. Village children, dressed in their school uniforms, sat cross-legged on the floor, clutching their notebooks. Ethel joined them, whispering encouragement. On the balcony above, Poirot leaned over, murmuring, "Let the wisdom of the heart guide them." 20 minutes passed as autumn light shifted through stained glass, bathing the hall in warm hues. Finally, the council returned to the dais. Mrs. Wellington stepped forward, candlelight dancing on her silver hair. "By unanimous decision," she declared, "we confer the Ashcombe crest upon Dr. Daniel Langley, whose compassion and initiative best embody the spirit of service and mercy." A cheer rose as Dr. Langley approached the chalice, into which he poured a small measure of elderflower cordial. He dipped his finger into the liquid and traced the crest upon his heart. Penelope presented him with a velvet-lined case containing the gilded emblem on a silver chain. As he placed it around his neck, the room filled with applause. Dr. Langley's eyes shone. "I accept this trust with humility and devotion. Greystone's future shall be brightened by our shared efforts." The children clapped, and villagers stepped forward to congratulate him. Poirot descended softly from the gallery to join the assembly. He offered Dr. Langley a warm handshake. "Mes amis," he said, addressing the crowd, "today we have witnessed a noble puzzle solved, not by force, but by integrity. May this crest guide its guardian, and may the spirit of unity endure." As candlelight glimmered atop banners and faces, the assembly dispersed into the crisp air beyond the great doors. Under a canopy of amber leaves, the manor and village stood more closely bound than ever, their hearts stitched together by shared purpose. And in that unity, Dame Beatrice's legacy, renewed in every compassionate deed, would flourish for generations to come. Chapter 17. A Harvest of Promise. Late morning sunlight streamed through the west wing's arched windows, illuminating the Fuges A, new wing of the village schoolhouse, where Dr. Langley, as guardian of the crest, prepared to oversee the first disbursement of the educational fund. Children's laughter echoed down the corridor as Penelope Ashcombe, Ethel, Mrs. Trevelyan, and Reverend Fletcher took their places at the low dais. Poirot arrived shortly afterward, his cane tapping softly on the polished floor, his moustaches quivering with anticipation. "Mes amis," he greeted quietly as he joined them. "Today we see the seeds we have planted take root." He offered a warm nod to Dr. Langley, who returned it with a solemn smile. Behind them, rows of wooden desks bore the polished satchels of the scholarship recipients, bright-eyed boys and girls who brimmed with hope. Dr. Langley rose and cleared his throat. "Friends of Greystone, it is with great joy that I announce the inaugural grants of the Ashcombe Educational Fund. 10 children will receive full scholarships to attend this school for the next year, including books, meals, and afternoon lessons in practical skills." He gestured toward the children, each now standing with nervous pride. Penelope stepped forward to read the list of names. Emma Clark, no relation to the schoolmaster. Samuel Hodge, little twins Mary and Joseph Carter, and 6 others chosen by the council. At each name, the child's guardian stepped forward to receive the official certificate emblazoned with the crest. Mrs. Trevelyan handed each paper in careful rotation, her hand steady despite the tears glistening in her eyes. When the last certificate was presented, Reverend Fletcher led a brief prayer of thanksgiving. Then Ethel called the children to gather at the front of the room. "Today," she said, voice ringing, "you are the first of many who will carry forward this legacy. We expect great things of you, not only in knowledge, but in generosity and kindness." A chorus of small yeses followed, and one brave boy named Samuel Hodge piped up. "Miss Ashcombe, I promise I will help others when I grow up." Ethel smiled, pressing a hand to her heart. "That, mon ami, is the very spirit of the Ashcombe crest." Poirot rose from his seat, drawing the assembly's attention. "Permit me a brief observation," he said. "In every puzzle there lies a pattern, pieces that must align to reveal truth. Here, the pattern is clear. Education fosters empathy, and empathy binds a community. When you, the scholars of Greystone, learn not only letters, but also compassion, You become the living keys to your own destinies and to the flourishing of this village." A ripple of applause followed, mingled with children's footsteps as they scrambled back to their desks. Dr. Langley then invited them to enjoy a special luncheon on the lawn, where plates of fresh bread, cheese, and orchard apples awaited. The schoolhouse doors opened to reveal a sunshine-drenched courtyard, and the children poured out, voices rising in delight. Penelope lingered with Poirot under a blossoming apple tree. "Thank you," she said softly. "Without your guidance, Monsieur Poirot, we might never have unlocked the true purpose of the fund." She glanced toward the lawn, where Ethel and Mrs. Trevelyan guided the youngest pupils in an impromptu game of ring and pin. Poirot's green eyes gleamed. "Madame, it has been an honour. Yet the greatest reward is seeing lives transformed." He tapped his cane against the grass. "Observe how they gather, united by opportunity, laughter, and the promise of discovery." Suddenly, a small girl ran up, handing Poirot a pressed violet tied with a ribbon. The flower was identical to the one Everard had sent his beloved so long ago. Poirot accepted it with a gentle smile and placed it in his coat pocket. "Merci, petite amie," he whispered, patting the child's shoulder. "You have given me a gift as precious as any puzzle solved." Ethel joined them, carrying a wicker basket filled with saplings of Beatrice's heart roses. "We thought the garden might benefit from new plantings to celebrate this occasion," she explained. With Poirot's assistance, and amid the children's cheers, they planted 5 young bushes at the edge of the lawn, marking each with a small wooden plaque bearing a scholar's name. As the sun dipped toward the western hills, the gathering wound down, and families led their children homeward. Dr. Langley gathered Penelope and Ethel for a moment by the schoolhouse door. "The fund's future is secure," he said, "and I intend to expand its reach next season, to adults seeking literacy, to apprentices of the crafts, and, God willing, to those beyond our parish boundaries." Penelope nodded, her eyes shining. "Everard would be proud," she whispered. Poirot, leaning on his cane, surveyed the pastoral scene. Rosy bushes, bright-eyed scholars, and the venerable manor rising behind them. "Yes," he murmured, "a harvest of promise indeed," tipped his hat to the sisters. "Mon cœur est comblé." With a final nod to the children's laughter, he turned and walked back toward the manor, leaving behind a community forever changed by the power of learning, and by a puzzle that bloomed into hope. Chapter 18. The Enduring Light. A crisp winter's. Morning settled over Greystone Manor, as snowflakes drifted lazily across the sky, coating the rose arches and ancient stone in soft white. Inside the grand hall, a select company gathered one last time. Penelope and Ethel Ashcombe, Lord Henry, Cyril, Dr. Langley, Mrs. Trevelyan, Reverend Fletcher, and, at the centre, Hercule Poirot himself. By the flicker of tallow candles, they prepared to witness the final ceremony of the Ashcombe legacy. Penelope, now bearing the composure earned through trials both delicate and profound, stepped forward to the marble dais, where the combined volumes of Everard's journal and Beatrice's memoir rested beneath a velvet cloth. With tender care, she laid a single sprig of Beatrice's heart rose atop the books, its petals still as full of promise as on that first planting. Silence fell as the family and friends present leaned in to honour the memory of two souls who had bound their hearts across a century. "Monsieur Poirot," Penelope said, her voice steady yet suffused with warmth, "you have guided us through puzzles of lock and logic, but your greatest service has been leading us to the true keys of our hearts. We present these chronicles and this testament to Greystone's library so that all who walk these halls may learn of sacrifice, forgiveness, and devotion." With a gentle flourish, she drew back the cloth, revealing the gilded spines that now bore the Ashcombe crest. Ethel crossed to a brass lever set into the floor. With her hand upon it, the dais slid open to reveal a hidden niche carved into the marble, Greystone's last secret unveiled. Inside, the library's curator, Thomas, held open his book of ledgers. He placed the volumes within the niche alongside scrolls listing the manor's benefactors, ensuring the chronicles would sit, immortalized among Greystone's greatest treasures. Lord Henry Ashcombe, proud and solemn, advanced with a silver bell. With one respectful chime, he sealed the niche's marble door, a blessing in stone. So long as this hall stands, so too shall the stories of Everard and Beatrice inspire all who seek understanding, he declared, his deep voice echoing against the vaulted ceiling. Dr. Langley, wearing the gilded crest around his neck, stepped forward with Mrs. Wellington and Reverend Fletcher. Together, they placed a bronze plaque beneath the niche. "Here rests the testament of love and learning. May its light guide every soul who enters Greystone's embrace." The congregation bowed, and the hush that followed carried the weight of centuries. Poirot, standing with his cane planted lightly on the polished floor, surveyed the scene with serene satisfaction. His moustaches twitched in delight. "Mes amis," he said softly, "you have solved the final puzzle, not through deduction alone, but through compassion and unity. You have proven that the greatest mysteries yield to kindness and courage." Cyril, once brusque and impetuous, now spoke with measured conviction. "Greystone has given us more than inheritance. It has given us purpose." He turned to Ethel. "Together, we've built a legacy worth more than titles." Ethel smiled. Her earlier rivalry with Cyril now transformed into unwavering companionship. Mrs. Trevelyan, whose journey from fearful maid to trusted administrator had been extraordinary, stepped to Poirot. She offered him a bound album filled with photographs of the garden ceremonies, the classroom's laughter, and village celebrations. "For you, monsieur," she said, "so you may remember every blossom you helped cultivate." Poirot accepted the gift with a bow. "Merci, madame. These images shall warm my heart on the coldest nights." Reverend Fletcher raised his Bible. "Let us pray for the enduring spirit of Greystone, for every child who learns here, for every soul who finds solace in its walls, and for the memory of those whose love endures beyond time." His words drifted like incense, weaving hope among those who stood in reverent circle. As the ceremony concluded, the company drifted into the library's gallery, where moonlight glinted on the rows of books. Outside, the first embers of dawn glowed beyond frosted windows, promising a day as new as the beginnings forged by Everard and Beatrice. Penelope and Ethel lingered at the hearth, their reflections dancing in the polished brass and dark wood. Poirot, upon receiving his departure summons from the carriage, paused at the threshold. He looked back at the sisters, their faces warmed by resolve and remembrance. Madame, mademoiselle, he whispered, may your hearts remain as open as these pages, and may every generation of Ashcombs and of village children find in these chronicles the courage to love and to learn. With that final benediction, Poirot stepped into the crisp morning air. Snow swirled around his bowler hat as Georges tended the carriage door. As the wheels turned on the frosted drive, the last vestiges of a case closed behind him, but the light kindled within Greystone Manor would shine on forever. In the hush of winter's dawn, the echoes of two hearts united across time murmured promises of hope to all who would listen.